Today we will be looking at 5-2 relations and functions. Some of this should be a review from last year. So before you begin this, I want you to go ahead and pause this, and I want you to watch the YouTube video Metamorphosis. Welcome back, and now we will look at our vocab, and we will review what a relation is. Remember, a relation is any set of ordered pairs. A function then is a special type of relation that we talked about last year. A function is a relation that assigns exactly one output value for each input value. So the important part here is that you have only one output for each input. One way to test it, if you have a graph, is called the vertical line test. Remember, a vertical line test is used to analyze a graph of a relation to tell if it is a function or not. And then function notation is when instead of using y, they use f of x is used for y. It is read as f of x. So that's a quick review of our vocab from last year. Now we'll go ahead and review the different types of relations. There are 4 different types of relations, and you need to determine which one is a function. So if I look here, 1-to-1 is the first type of relation. Each one of the inputs goes to exactly one output. The next type is 1-to-many relation, and if I look here, A, this one input goes to 3 outputs. So, and then if you look at B, it's 1-to-1. So because this is 1 for the input on all of them, it's a 1, 2, and because there's a number other than 1 over here, it's 1-to-many. The third type is many-to-1. If I look here, A and B, these two both go to this single 1. C then is the only one that goes to 70. So once I have the numbered, I look here, there's more than 1 here. There's a 2, so because of that, it's many-to-1. So any other number in the input or the output value will result in the word many. If I look at number 4 here, A, this one, goes to 2 outputs. On the next one, B and C, these two both go to this single 1. I now have them all numbered. There's a 2 here, so that makes this many-to-many because of this 2 as well. Once we have that, then we have to go back and recognize which ones are functions. Remember, a function only has one output, so if I look here, 1-to-1, that second word there, this 1, represents the output, so since it has one output, it is a function. 1-to-many would not be because of this word right here. Many-to-1 is a function, and many-to-many is not a function. Remember, all 4 of these are relations, but only 2 of them make a function because their outputs are 1. So a function is a relation that assigns exactly one output to each input. Which of the relations are also functions? Well, remember, to be a function, you have to have one output. So 1-to-1 and many-to-1 are also functions. If we go ahead and we turn our page, we'll get to some examples now that we've completed our review. The first one says it wants you to use a mapping diagram to determine whether each relation is a function. So if we look at this first one, we have to remember how to make a mapping diagram. Remember, when we make a mapping diagram, we always put the numbers in order from least to greatest. So I have 11, 12, 13, and 20 in the inputs. 11, 12, 13, and 20 for my inputs. My outputs are -2, -1, and 7. And if you notice, I have 2 -2's as my output. You only write it once. Now I go ahead and connect them with arrows. 11 goes to -2, 12 goes to -1, 13 goes to -2, and 20 goes to 7. Once you have created your mapping diagram, then you can go ahead and figure out if it is a function or not, and that's when we number it. So 11 and 13, these two right here, 11 and 13, both go to the single -2. 12 is the only one that goes to -1, and 20 is the only one that goes to 7. So if we look at our numbers, there's a 2 here, so that makes this mini 2, and there's only 1's there. And now that we look here, after we name it, the output is 1, so this one would be yes. It is a function. Then we go ahead and we do the exact same thing for the second example here. So again, I order them in least to greatest. There's 2 -2's in the input. I only write it once. Then I have -1 and 6. For my outputs, I have -1, 0, 1, and 3. Remember, always put them least to greatest. -2 goes to -1, and -2 also goes to 1. -1 goes to 0, and 6 goes to 3. You will probably get to the point where you don't have to do the numbering on the side like I do next. So if you can do it without it, that is fine. Oops. This -2, this one input, goes to both of these outputs. -1 then is the only one that goes to 0, and 6 is the only one that goes to 3. So if I notice, my inputs all are 1, 2, and then if I look at my outputs, there is a 2 there. So that's 1 to many. Remember, in order to tell if it's a function, you always look at the output. Since this output is many, this would be no, not a function. Example 2 then will probably be one of your guys' favorites. Once we review the vertical line test, it's much easier and much quicker, especially if the graph is already done. But if the graph isn't done, you have to graph it first. So we go 3, 0. And then we go -2, 1, 0, -1, -3, 2, and 3, 2. Okay, once you have that, you need to create a vertical line, and it helps if I have it be a color. There we go. And you can use your pencil. You can just slide your eyes across it and see. What you do is you take a vertical line starting from left to right and see if it ever touches more than one of those points at once. So here it touches 1 point, 1 point, 1 point. But when I get here, it actually touches 2 points at once. So that means there's 2 outputs there that are the same. So anytime it touches more than 1 point at a time, it is not a function. Let's say I were to erase one of these and this one was gone and it wasn't part of it. Then if I notice that green line never touches more than 1 point at a time, so my second example here would be, yes, it would be a function because it passes the vertical line test. Example 3 then is making a table from a function rule. If we look here, it says make a table for f of n is equal to -2n squared plus 7. Use 1, 2, 3, 4 as the domain values. Domain is another word for input or for your x value. So if we look here, we're going to go ahead and make this table. We have the n. We have our f of n. Oops, sorry. I skipped one here. We have our n, what our domain's going to be. Then we have our function rule here, negative 2n squared plus 7. And then we have our output, which is f of n. So we're going to use 1, 2, 3, and 4. So the first thing all you do is sub it in for n. Negative 2 times 1 squared plus 7. That gives us 5. Then we plug in 2. Negative 2 times 2 squared plus 7 is negative 1. Now we plug in 3. Negative 2 times 3 squared plus 7 gives you negative 11. And lastly, we have negative 2 times 4 squared plus 7, which gives us negative 25. This right here is a table for a function rule. Here's your inputs, your function rule, and your outputs. Example number 4 wants you to find the range. It says evaluate the function rule to find the range of the function for the domain. So again, the domain is the input, so we're going to input this in for A, and we're going to get our outputs. And it doesn't say you have to make a table this time, so you can just write it out and show me your work. Negative 3 times, our first A is negative 3 plus 5, which gives us 14. The second one we're going to plug in is 1. So we get negative 3 times 1 plus 5, which gives us 2. And lastly, we're going to do negative 3 times 4 plus 5, which gives us negative 7. And then we go ahead and we write what our range is going to be. And I always try to do it from least to greatest, so my greatest range is negative 7, then 2, and then 14. So that's my range when my input is negative 3, 1, and 4. Just a quick review of our vocab. It says, what all can the x values be called? X values can be called the domain. They can be called the input. And of course, they can be called the x. The y values then can be called range. So if they use domain, you'll usually hear range. If they use input, you'll usually call it the output. And then of course, we can also use f of x is also the y value. Okay, you can go ahead and complete the quick checks and then look at your schedule to find what your assignment is for this section.